Sudan's army has now agreed to the 24-hour ceasefire announced by the Rapid Support Forces earlier today. According to local media, the day-long ceasefire will take effect from Tuesday evening. Now, the agreement follows phone calls to each side from U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken after days of intense fighting. Earlier, the leader of the paramilitary group said the temporary ceasefire was to ensure the safe passage of civilians to receive aid and for the evacuation of the wounded. Let's speak now to Liesl Vaudran. She's a senior advisor to the African Union International Crisis Group in terms of the response of the African Union. Thank you very much, Liesl, for your time this afternoon. What do we need to know at this hour? Because I think an hour and a bit ago, we spoke to someone who indicated, well, this was a unilateral announcement, if you will, on the side of the one force saying they've declared a ceasefire. At this hour, we understand that both sides have declared a ceasefire. What do you as the AU know?
Yes, maybe just a correction. I work for the International Crisis Group, so I am the AU advisor for Crisis Group, and of course from Addis Ababa, from Nairobi, and generally in the Horn, we've been monitoring this very, very closely. So it's, as you said, there is now a ceasefire that will start at 6 p.m. this evening. So it is for humanitarian reasons mostly. So it is for civilians to be able to leave Khartoum. They've been bombing since Saturday, and also for the wounded to be evacuated, to get to hospitals. It's been really, really a dire situation. But a 24-hour ceasefire, of course, is just that. And then mediation and talks behind the scenes and pressure on both parties will definitely have to kick in so that there is a solution to this crisis. I think the African Union, IGAD, which is the regional organization, were quite quick off the mark. On Saturday already, IGAD had made a statement, and the AU chairperson, Musa Faki Mahamat. So, but it is a very, very tricky situation at this stage.
What do we do beyond releasing statements, Liesl?
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of diplomacy behind the scenes. And as you said, I mean, this ceasefire was after calls with Antony Blinken. The U.S. plays an important role in Sudan, in the region, and could be a support to African efforts like the African Union and IGAD. There's a trilateral mechanism that the UN, the AU and IGAD established to deal with Sudan. You know, Sudan is suspended from the African Union since October 2021 because of that coup. So the US can also, and other countries that are involved can also assist. For example, the African Union and IGAD have offered to travel to Sudan. Now, that's very difficult at this stage. And I mean, the whole airport is completely destroyed from the pictures that we've seen. So, the U.S. can assist like it did actually when we had the Pretoria Agreement here for the Ethiopian crisis. Some of the logistical support came from the Americans, but the African Union very clearly said in its meeting statement from its meeting on Sunday that, it would prefer, I think, for the African Union and regional players to mediate. But it is very difficult. South Africa is a member of the Peace and Security Council that met, the 15 members that met on Sunday. And other countries, such as Tunisia, which chaired this meeting on Sunday. So it is not only statements. I think there's a lot of diplomacy going on behind the scenes, and then this effort for the regional leaders eventually, even Musa Faki Mahamat, who is a chairperson of the AU Commission, to travel and try and negotiate. I mean, the advantage, in a sense, is we know these actors. These are two very, very powerful men. The General Vaudran, who is in charge of the army, and his deputy are fighting. It's not as if we are facing a situation, like elsewhere we have an invisible enemy that's somewhere in the bush and that's creating havoc. So somehow, hopefully, mediation should be possible in the coming days.
Liesl, just a warning. This is a very ignorant question. What fans the flames on the continent? It's 2023. We saw this in Angola with Jonas Savimbi. Maybe that's just but one example, but there's many others. There's what allows this to thrive and keep continuing in 2023. It cannot just be about egos.
Of course, you're right. What allows it to thrive is, firstly, I think, weak institutions of many countries, which allows militaries to feel that they have the power over and above the democratic processes and the civilian governments. I mean, what happened in Sudan, 30 years of Omar al-Bashir's rule, very authoritarian, very few liberties, and then people's dire economic situations made them then in 2019 get rid of Omar al-Bashir. And it's amazing, actually, I must say, the Sudanese just kept at it and are in the streets, and they are still demanding, a civilian government and to get these militaries out. But of course, what can you do against the guns? And they've got snipers and, bombing people from the air with air power and so on. So you had that background, you had weak institutions, you have powerful militaries, many are obviously armed also by outside actors who want to get their hands on resources. And it's every country is different, but it very often is underlying issues of, as I said, weak institutions and then militarization, basically.
Let's take a listen at a United Nations envoy in Sudan, what he had to say yesterday at the UN.
We are calling, of course, on both sides to stop the fighting immediately, to allow access for aid workers, humanitarian aid workers, and to allow evacuations. We also we strongly request both sides to respect the need to protect UN agencies, UN installations, embassies, aid workers, medical facilities. There have been grave transgressions here.
We understand that a European Union embassy was also impacted by the ongoing tensions in Sudan. Liesl, just maybe finally for us, we spoke about the role of the African Union. So we're seeing how the United Nations is dealing with certain issues about the continent, more so the Security Council, where the majority of its work is got to do with conflict on the continent. In terms of maybe the optics, and this might just be silly, but it would appear as though they are taking it... What do you make of the United Nations and these press briefings where they give you blow-by-blow accounts of what's happening, and the African Union not having these press briefings? Is it not important to, at least at face value, to keep people on the continent and to give them that confidence that indeed we've got a handle on situations?
I think you're absolutely right. That's a very good recommendation to the African Union. And, just to attend some of their meetings is very, very difficult. Most of them are closed. And you really have to search on their website for the press releases. So that would improve its visibility. And, it's our organization. These are our ambassadors who are sitting on the Peace and Security Council. As I said, they make these decisions. So actually, in terms of transparency, we should know what they are doing and what we are funding, actually, in terms of the African Union. But that doesn't mean that nothing is done. The UN also has its challenges, especially when it comes to peacekeeping on the African continent. So there's I think working together with the UN very often, I mean, that's first prize because the UN has got more money and capacity to do things. And then, and much better communication. That would be a good message to transmit to the African Union, actually.
Management of perceptions, Liesl. Thank you very much for your time. Liesl Vaudran is an advisor to the African Union with the International Crisis Group. Thank you.